Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned. We're going to teach you how to experience growth daily.
All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. These are the Dr. Dads coming at you. Dr. David Wardy, how are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful, man. Another day in paradise.
That's right. You know, it's an interesting time that we're living in, and every day seems like a sort of a new day and new information coming out. And then every day kind of feels a bit like Groundhog Day too. So, but I tell you what, I mean, every week when we get a chance to speak, I'm always learning something new, and we're always stimulating our brains, which is part of the conversation today.
Absolutely, man. You know, I tell the people that we talk about at the clinic, we're always talking about the podcast because they'll be like, oh, I listened to this episode and that one, and we're loving it. And I say, I'm loving it too because I learn stuff every time I get on there too. So it's a blast, man. Like this has been fun, like just jumping on every week, like you're saying. And whether we have a speaker or not, man, I'm always learning from you as well. So this is good stuff.
Versa. Well, it's funny. I had a patient that came in today and they said, oh, you do a podcast too? Like, do you like doing that? And I'm like, yeah, I love it. I mean, it's taking an hour out of our day, and we're learning new stuff that we learn, like you said, from each other, from the guests that we have. And when I think about our parents' generation, and I think about, my wife's parents, and I think like, my goodness, what are they going to do when they retire? Because all they know is the work that they're doing. Like, what does life look like as far as engaging the brain? And part of our discussion, our discussion today is about keeping that brain strong and adaptable and supportive and helping to support the neurointegration, the wiring of the brain and neurogenesis and new brain wiring production. I think of our parents' generation. I wonder if they have the excitement for learning like we have, or are we just sort of geeky docs that love to keep learning new things? Like, what do you think's going on there in that generation?
Well, it's funny. Once you said that, the first thing that came to mind was I've noticed that like older individuals, like when they get into that retirement zone and when they're in that kickback mode and they're not working anymore, you kind of see some individuals degrade really fast.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And then the ones, you hear about this all the time, the ones that are always working or they're always involved and still having to use their brain every day, they actually live much higher quality, longer lives sometimes. And then you hear about those people just going in their sleep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a little bit of in between there. But my point in case is like, do you think maybe we have to keep using this thing as we age, even though we're done, to actually be healthy?
Yeah. There
might be something there.
There's something there. Well, and think about the culture that we live in. It's all about getting to retirement. So let's get there as fast as we can so we can hurry up and die. Obviously that's not what people are thinking consciously.
Well,
but
some people do though, man. Like,
yeah.
I've had to have conversations with some of my older patients about, just because you're retired doesn't mean you're stepping into the grave now. Like, you still have a lot of life ahead of you, and it's going to be what you want to make it. Yeah. But it's interesting how some people go into that mindset of like, oh, I'm in my latter years, and they start handicapping themselves. Mm-hmm. This is important stuff, man. So I'm glad we're going to talk about this today.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good jumping point into this discussion is just the mindset around aging and the aging brain. And it's, the Alzheimer's numbers scare the crap out of me to some degree. And just for those of you who may not know, it's expected that everyone's developing Alzheimer's as we're aging. But the numbers are meant to be 1-on-1 for, I think there's this projected data of 2032 where there's this new projection of expectations for like cancer, autism, and Alzheimer's is in there, and it's literally everybody. So the message really is that if we don't use it, we lose it, technically, metaphorically, and biochemically. Physiologically speaking, that's exactly what's going on. It's this deterioration because of toxicity in the environment, all the things that we've are taught on this podcast in many different episodes. But it's also the starting point is just buying into the fact that we deteriorate as we age. What if we painted a different picture for ourselves? So I'd like to start sort of on mindset and then get into some more of the physiology of basic brain support.
Well, let's start with paradigm, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you hit it on the head. That's usually where we have to start with some of these things, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
So, like Dr. Nick is speaking to, you either believe that your body is self-healing, self-maintaining, self-regulating, or you believe that your body just kind of just gets beat to shit as you go through life, and then you're just kind of left with whatever's left over at the end.
It's a sad picture.
And it is a sad picture. When you were talking right now about the brain, I remember hearing a speaker, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, talking about how he said, they've done some studies and shown that the human brain right around 40 years of age can be running at half its capacity already from when you were younger. And I remember when I heard that guy and I thought, golly, like, think of all the individuals around their 40s that start to just slow down with everything because they didn't take care of this very, very, very important, gland. And if we all understood a little bit more about this amazing gland that we have and what it does and what it's capable of, we'd probably take a little bit better care of it. And then understand that there are some things that we do have control over moving forward on this journey, right? To take care of it so that it takes care of us. Because honestly, it's running the show, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, with understanding that every gland, organ, tissue in the body has to interface with the brain in order to perform its function. This should be of great importance. I mean, I honestly feel like this should be something taught in schools at a young age, even from like concussion protection and things like that, obviously, which can be more common with kids' sports and whatnot. But I feel like we should do a better job of brain education in the world we live in, especially with those kinds of statistics. Like if it's expected that everyone has some level of Alzheimer's that slowly develops, the earliest of symptoms could be brain fog and fatigue and potentially eye strain and just wearing out easier as the day goes on. Like if those are some of the early signs, which it just means it's sort of insidious onset that, most people can put their hand up and go, oh yeah, I've got brain fog. And for that to be so normalized and to not be considered as an important enough symptom to address now, so that you're focusing on prevention as your years go by, so that when you do hit it in those retirement years, you can actually be proactive and realize that maybe there's more to life than just retirement. And maybe there's this whole, purpose-driven life that we can still live after retirement. And maybe we can still be in pursuit of happiness and our goals and our dreams, even though we're in those retirement years. Like, what a change in perspective. How many people wait their entire life to travel the world? They wait for retirement, and then all of a sudden all they're doing is using their finances that they built up over their years to just deal with the clinical, terminal, or chronic illness that they're dealing with. I mean, that's such a common story, and we've all allowed ourselves to believe that. We're waiting for this inevitable future where we're going to experience joy and bliss and freedom and vacation time, only to realize that we get there and we're paying for it out of pocket and out of our retirement funds to try to heal ourselves and prevent ourselves from leaving the planet earlier than expected.
Well, I love that you're talking about the longevity piece, man, because that's it right there, man. I mean, that's a big piece of the puzzle, is like, what is that going to look like for you? And you're right. Like, are you just going to believe what everyone else is telling you, or actually science is showing us something different now? It's just a different process, right? There's a tension that needs to be put there. But also, man, I wanted to just mention on the other side of that, what's the quality of that look like? So our brain is also in charge of how we feel on a daily basis. Yeah. Are you in joy and happiness, and are you up and have energy and feel good? Or are you depressed and anxious and, always down? So like, a lot of your brain health has to do with that as well. So what does that quality of your daily life look on this journey of longevity? What do you want that to be like? Because you're saying in these latter years, we want to have all this joy in our life. Well, if we don't take care of our brain, it's going to be a little tough to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that starts now with what we're doing on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it, man.
So how do you think, just from a mindset point of view, how do we help to engage people? I mean, we feel like everyone should be listening to these podcasts because they're so informative, but how do we get people to buy into the fact that you got to start as early as you can? I mean, Diego's bouncing around behind you. You want to start with your kids if you're a parent listening to this, and then you obviously want to start with yourself now. You don't want to wait for those symptoms to rise, because once those symptoms have started to arise, you're focusing a little bit more on management than you are in prevention. And it's really a sign when symptoms are there, it's been brewing for years. So getting that proactive mindset, I think creating a good vision of what you want your future to look like, and not just wait for retirement, but try to focus in on living in the present moment as much as you can now. And I think that is like sort of step one, is to reframe what it means to be healthy and what you want that vitality to look like in retirement years. But what kind of work are you going to do now, and not just live from a hedonistic mind frame, like smoke the cigarettes, drink the beer, the alcohol, party, eat all those high fructose corn syrup beverages and sugar, just because you're enjoying life, and to the detriment of whatever future looks like, especially if you got kids, man, because you want to have energy for your grandkids and hopefully your great grandkids as well.
Well, and the bigger thing I'd say as a parent when you have children is, it does have to start when your kids are kids. You got to get on it, and they've got to start doing things differently than you did probably.
Yeah.
But remember that your kids are watching you. So it doesn't matter what you say to them. You can't be sitting in front of your child and like eating bad food and sugar and stuff, and then telling them they can't have it. And then when they're asking, well, why are you eating it? Do you honestly think your kid's going to grow up and not eat it when they watched you eat it? So there's a little bit of a gut call there for parents, because I know a lot of parents that this is the story. Is they are starting with their kids, but then they're still eating some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to create that picture of what you want your kids to see and be that person, so that they can watch you. And that's what they're going to learn from, because we learned from our parents. It was learned behavior. Totally. And we've had to unlearn a lot of things that we were taught, right? Some of these things. But I mean, be that example if you're going to do this, is I would start with. So once you have that game plan, what that looks like, be that, and then be that for your kids, so that you can teach them moving forward what that's supposed to look like.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's jump into the next one, which I think is sort of going from that mindset into movement. Let's talk about movement and brain health.
Essential for the brain, man. One of the easiest things I tell my patients, 3 times a week, you have to do some form of aerobic activity for 30 minutes. Just for your brain, not for anything else. I'm not even just saying just to be fit. Just get your butt on a treadmill, an elliptical, go for a walk. Like, I don't care what it is. Mm-hmm. But for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, you got to be moving and doing something continuously. And this is honestly for brain, because studies have shown that people that do this regularly in their lives have a lower incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia and some of these other things.
Depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Oh, man, buddy.
Yeah.
You felt, I mean, anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, on the days that you get up and you go work out and you start your day, I know you're going to tell me you feel better on those days, and those days go better as a whole than the days that you don't do that.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're winding your brain up in the morning. It's very simple. Mm-hmm. It's the beautiful thing that it does for us. And it's just so easy, right? It costs nothing. And you just got to move. And then we need that movement anyway, right? So get out there and wind your nervous system. Think of it as like you got to wind, you're a winding toy, and you got to wind yourself up 3 times a week.
Yeah, I love that. Something that I experienced over the weekend, we were away on vacation, family vacation. We went with some friends, and my buddy, he's a avid runner. I mean, this guy was telling me stories about his like 60K run or his 50K run. Like, the guy that abuses his body. To me on the outside, seemingly like he abuses his body through running. And I'm blown away by the monotony of running for that long, and the kind of like mental endurance and the physical conditioning that is required. But so anyways, this guy's a beast when it comes to running long distances. And of the 4 days we were there with them, I ran with him twice. and we did, probably about hour-long runs, and he runs at a pretty good pace. I don't run all that often. I do it for like much shorter time frames, but it just reminded me of just what happens when you push yourself beyond your normal routine. And it was amazing. I mean, like you said, that euphoria that you get, there's something about doing something somewhat regularly, or even just shocking the body with a beyond your normal limit kind of movement that just wakes you up in a way that's hard to describe. And that could be biking, I guess it could be swimming, it could be anything that's sort of pushing you beyond your normal zone. I mean, I think that that's the sweet spot for that BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which increases with exercise. It's shown to, I think, increase more so with high-intensity interval training, or essentially even these longer endurance type events, because it's pushing you beyond what feels safe and normal. And the euphoria that comes as a follow-up, like you said, for us, when we talk about exercise for our patients, it is mostly for brain health. And so I just want to throw that in there of like challenging yourself. Don't just go through the motions, but like be open to going a little bit past what you're comfortable with.
Well, and I would lump in primal movement with that. And, as you're talking about the neurological effect that it has, I mean, look at primal movement. When you start moving your body in different movement patterns that you're not used to, one of the things that everybody will man, like my brain's different. Like I feel just awake, and like they just feel different. And it's because they're stimulating their nervous system.
Yeah.
When you're doing those primal movements and you're taking your body out of the movement patterns that it is used to. So real quick, we have something called neuroplasticity. And the way you move, believe it or not, will burn pathways into your brain. And you're wired that way from all the movements that you make, whether it's you do certain sports or you're a yogi or whatever. We wire all this stuff in through repetition. But once you take your body outside of those movement patterns and you expose it to something new, your brain lights up, just starts lighting your brain up, and you start to create new pathways. And this is something that we all need to be doing very regularly for our brain. So I love primal movement. I mean, just outside of doing the basic cardio like we're talking, go on YouTube, look up primal movement. There's GMB fitness. I mean, there's so much of this stuff out there now. And just start playing with how you move your body.
Yeah.
Move it in some capacities you've never done before for 15, 20 minutes. Then get up and see how you feel. You might be pleasantly surprised there. That was when I started that stuff, man. That's actually what I enjoyed about it, more so than just the physical piece.
Yeah.
I always felt more crisp up top after I would do some of those workouts. So yeah, man, for sure.
Yeah, I love that you brought that in. I mean, you're the one who showed that to me, and I remember implementing that a lot more regularly into my workout routines. And you feel like, when you're at a gym, you kind of get these looks like, what's that guy doing? Hopping around like a frog or a spider or monkey or a bear. Those are the ones you showed me. But yeah, like you said, there's something about orienting yourself in different ways and encouraging different types of movement patterns that technically kids do on their own without even thinking about it. That's just how they move. But to be able to retrain your brain into that experience again, powerful stuff. And I mean, yoga has some similar components to it, but
right.
It's still it's a different variation of it for sure. But yeah, so movement's significantly important. And how many people just go through life, years, decades could go by without having somewhat of a regular rhythm for movement.
Huge.
Yeah.
So we got mindset and movement already.
Yeah. So next one we're talking about is hormones, because we talked about longevity and the aging brain and whatnot. So we have to talk about hormone health. So here's some interesting facts: is that your hormones decline by 50% from the age 25 to 40. So that's a pretty big drop, and that's going to be a significant drop, especially for those in the SAD diet, the standard American diet. People, as we said, who are not moving, they're more sedentary, and they've got that sort of hedonistic type of behavior where they're not thinking about setting themselves up for success down the road, and working as they do throughout their day without thinking about bigger visions and mindset and doing something to actively engage that process. There's a natural hormonal decline, and it's going to speed up in that kind of environment.
I have that conversation whenever longevity comes up, right? Because I tell people, look, because I always get the whole like, well, it's just age. Yeah, there are some things that you can use that argument, but what Nick is saying is we are in control of this a little bit. So you can either have this massive decline of your hormone health as you're pushing into the latter years, and or it just slowly starts to drop off. And believe it or not, you're in control of that. So like Nick's saying, like, where's that mindset? Which path are you going to take? Because we've all seen this. Everybody, I'll give it a quick, I think I've told you this story before. Like, I met a guy my dad's age one time when I think my dad was like in his mid 40s. This guy was my dad's age, and the guy looked like he was 20 years older than my dad.
Wow.
And I remember asking my dad after we drove off, because he had met him to give him something when I was younger, and I said, my dad's like, that guy he's my age. And I said, Dad, he looks like 20 years older than you. And he goes, that's what happens when you burn the candles at both ends, David. Like, I still remember that moment from my childhood. But I mean, look at that, right?
Totally.
He didn't even look my dad's age.
Yeah.
I'm not even in the same ballpark. So I mean, what you do on a daily basis, everybody, you're writing out that story, what that's going to look like, like Nick's saying. So it's huge.
No, it's massive. And I mean, on that, to that point is, one of the things that we tell our patients is that you don't have a hormone problem. Your hormones are a result or an effect of your circumstances, of how you're adapting to your environment, how you're challenging your body, your physiology. It's just a response. It's not an underlying cause of anything. It's just constantly responding. So if we understand that, then we can do something to, slow down the deterioration, and we can do things that actually massively ramp things up, so that we actually, that cascade of dropping may be the norm for people, but it doesn't have to be your experience. And so there's lots of things obviously that we can do about that. But let's talk about some of those hormones. So we've got growth hormone, testosterone, for women, estrogen, progesterone.
Those are all repair hormones, right?
Oh, totally. They're anabolic. They're building muscle. They're supporting obviously their circadian clock, and they're obviously the repair, the immune system, brain function. They're affecting the neurological repair in the brain. I mean, they're significantly important. And talk about brain fog and things like that. It's very common for even women in that perimenopause, menopausal zone, where they start getting super brain foggy. Maybe they've had 1 or 2 kids or more, and their hormones have gotten a little bit more of a butt kicking than say someone else who hasn't been through those experiences. And they're going to feel it a lot more. That hormonal imbalance is going to be more extreme in those kind of circumstances. And men are in the same boat. Men might be experiencing ED, erectile dysfunction, or low libido, or low vitality, or decreased, just physical performance and conditioning, or just sense of self starts to go down. Like, these are all signs that your hormones are getting, smashed up.
Well, and another way to look at that, man, and an easy way that I simplify it sometimes when I talk to people is, Nick's talking about all these healing hormones, repair hormones. When you're overstressed and there's too much interference on your brain, your nervous system, you don't have any of those hormones doing their job. They're all being blocked by all the other hormones that you don't want in abundance in your system. Your body cannot heal when it's in emergency defense mode. So since we're talking about the brain, if you are there and you are experiencing like the brain fog, like Nick says, and you're noticing these shifts, whether you're a male or a female, then there's already interferences that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And like Nick is saying, you didn't just get there when you started having the symptoms. Most likely years of this have been going on. So you can't just think, well, what have I been doing lately? Right? It's totally. Like, well, what does that picture look like for the past maybe 5, 6, 7 years? What have I been doing? Right?
Yeah.
Because I've experienced those things, man.
Oh, man. Totally.
But when I think about those periods when I struggled with some of those things really bad in my life, I was in a boatload of stress.
Yeah.
Like a lot of stress. I mean, you've seen that picture of me.
I was just thinking that.
I experienced a lot of what you just said during that period when Clarissa had gotten sick, and I was still dealing with all that, man.
Yeah. And think about that. That could have been the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah, easily.
right?
Very,
Like
very easily.
you have the tools, you have the desire to not live that way, but think about how many people get stuck there. And this isn't pointing fingers or faulting anyone. This is just, maybe a lack of knowledge, a lack of drive, and just it's an addiction, and you just get stuck in your habitual patterning, and it just becomes your reality, and you think that, well, there's nothing else that's possible for me. So it's we get it, and we see it on a regular basis, and there's a way out of it too.
Well, and I did a post the other day.
Oh,
Did
I
you see
love that
post?
post. Yeah, it was awesome.
And that is perfect time, right, to bring that up. So
Yeah.
I posted something on social media, and I think I put it on the Dr. Dad's, and it was,
the whispers, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
if you listen to your body when it whispers, then you won't have to hear it scream. So really what Nick's talking to is like, how in tune are you with listening to your body, and then being honest with yourself when like it's like a daily thing or a weekly thing where we're having symptoms that you haven't had before. That's just an alarm going off your brain telling you, hey, I need you to do something here. Like what you're doing is not working. We need to make some changes here. So you got to be good at listening to those whispers.
Yeah, that was such a good. Did you come up with that quote?
I did not. I have to say, unfortunately, I saw it on some other chiropractors' social media, but
It's okay.
It was a good reshare, man, because it's so true, and it needs to be said over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, and taking that hormone function back to the brain. Well, it's essentially when you're reading hormones, it's kind of like reading the brain to some degree, because it's your brain that's telling those glands what to produce, how much. And so, as you said before, when we're under chronic stress, the brain's perceiving that chronic stress and is sending those signals to block those rebuilding repair hormones, and it's sending out the fight or flight hormones instead. So, it's a measurement whenever we do our, just like whenever you're doing your hormone testing, we have to take into consideration that this is a communication system that's coming from the brain through the perceived stress of the environment, down into those physiological range numbers that we're looking at, and it has a huge impact. And then the other side of it, which we've talked a number of times about, it is detoxification and the blunting of the receptor sites, and the poor communication as a result of toxicity. I don't know if we necessarily need to go directly into that in relation to hormones, but we should talk about toxicity in relation to brain health.
Well, I mean, yeah, we do need to talk. I mean, it goes both ways, right? It's a stress. It's an interference. If you're living a lifestyle where you're constantly have toxicity, toxic insults like every day of things that you can control, but you're not, and you're just like lacing your system every day, your nervous system has to deal with that, and it interprets that as stress, as biochemical stress, everybody. So yeah, that can be screwing up with your hormones.
Big time.
I was laughing as you were talking about when we run hormone panels and what that's actually looking like. And hey, everybody, it doesn't mean you need more hormones and you need to go to the pharmacy and get them. That's not what we're looking at. Like what Nick's saying is, it means that you need to make adjustments in your lifestyle if we're upside down here. Yeah. Which is probably, I would say, 99% of the case, right? That's always going to be a piece of the puzzle. Some people do need some hormone replacement to help a little bit. Yeah. But then at the end of the day, the bulk of that is what? It's what they're doing.
Totally.
And, toxicity, I mean, me and Nick talk about this all the time, but there's a reason we talk about it all the time, because it's a real deal.
Yeah. And it would explain why people drop their hormonal production so greatly. I mean, the longer we live on this planet, the more we're going to bioaccumulate. The more glyphosate that we're exposed to, which we know is, its direct mechanism in the body is to prevent proper protein synthesis. So you're literally not making the proper amino acid communication structures into these protein segments that we need for enzymes, and we need for neurotransmitters, that we need for everything. So
all your building blocks, right?
All your building blocks. Yeah. So I mean, that's just one of the myriad of different toxicants that we get exposed to. I mean, that's a pesticide or herbicide, but there's plastics, there's heavy metals, there's people who've had the dental work, and just the proximity of the dental work to the brain. I mean, there's so many different exposures to toxins, and that we go back to like the original discovery of mercury toxicity is the Mad Hatter, and these felt hat makers used to use mercury to bind the hats together, and they would develop all sorts of different types of neuroses and massive psychosis as a result of this chronic ongoing exposure to mercury. So, I mean, aluminum is a massive connection to Alzheimer's, dementia, autism as well. And then we've got lead and obviously mercury, as we said, but there's a ton of other heavy metals as well. And all of these things become really, I mean, mercury literally is probably the most neurotoxic, meaning brain toxic chemical known to man. So these things are, unfortunately, we get exposed to them quite frequently, more so, way more so than we should.
Well, and it's kind of disheartening as I'm hearing you, but you have to do your work, everybody, because you're getting, it's not a question of if, like Nick's talking, it's how much of this stuff you're getting hit with. It's not if, it's how much. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think I know what our home play is going to be today, man. But yeah, that's a biggie, man. That's a biggie.
Yeah. And I mean, not to jump down, I mean, we don't need to get into a vaccine discussion, but just to put some basic numbers, after the 70 some odd injections from the childhood vaccine schedule, it's expected you get around 12,000 micrograms of aluminum. I mean, that's a hefty dose. I mean, this is from data that R.F. Kennedy Jr. has shared many times. I mean, it just takes people to look up some of these regular, more frequent exposures. But I mean, there's things that's so far beyond what's acceptable in the human physiology, and it's understood that, you know, this stuff just, you know, you just pee it out or you poop it out and it doesn't go anywhere because it gets out of the blood. That's all they're typically measuring. But this stuff gets into your brain, it gets in the tissues. We know that, and science is showing that. So even on autopsy reports looking at, you know, Alzheimer's, dementia patients are seeing massive accumulations of aluminum in the brain. So yeah, the toxicity piece is significant. We all need to know our sources, from cookware to cleaning products to, you know, things that are getting put in or on our bodies. I think we all have to take responsibility for decreasing that burden as much as we can.
Yeah, the people that make these products, everybody, they're not necessarily looking out for you. So you have to look out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, we didn't mention water, but, you know, that's another thing, you know, just frequent, you know, filtering of your water just is a big part of decreasing toxic burden. So, and there's tests for that. I mean, Dr. David and I both run very regularly heavy metal tests to find out someone's toxic burden. And we encourage anyone with, you know, ongoing symptoms, fatigue or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or brain fog, headaches, depression, anxiety. I mean, these are all reasons to look for heavy metal toxicity exposure.
Massive, man.
Yeah.
So what's next? Neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters, yes.
Yeah.
It falls in line with the hormones.
Yeah.
So we all know about serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine. There's lots of
GABA, glutamate.
Yeah. Oxytocin sort of thrown in there, although it's also a hormone. But all these things need to, you know, bind to the receptor sites in the brain, and they have a role on how we feel, our behavior, our desire for movement or connection or addictions like dopamine, constantly checking the phone. They play such an extensive role. And, you know, one of the areas that I get most intrigued is something you and I talk about a lot with these neurotransmitters, is that flow state. You know, it's such a beautiful, Stephen Kotler in his book, Stealing Fire, amazing book, because it talks just about how the synergy of neurotransmitters need to come together, or that's the physiological aspect of flow state, or biochemical or neurochemical process, where anandamide and serotonin and epinephrine and endorphins and dopamine, all these, like the synergy of these neurotransmitters that come together to put you into this, what he refers to as hypofrontality, where you get into this higher brain function state where you move into this place of flow. And this happens with exercise, with being creative and, you know, doing your craft, and maybe it's painting or meditation, or, you know, biking, doing your downhill biking and the mountain biking that you guys took me on in Laguna. There's lots of different ways to activate this. And so,
that was a nice flow high after that, huh?
Oh man, huge. And that's, that kind of takes us back to that original discussion on exercise is so important for brain health, right? So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the neurotransmitters.
So again, like Nick was talking earlier, a lot of these are being created upstream. We have some of these in the gut and other places in the body, but your nervous system is writing this beautiful chemistry of these things all the time. And again, like what Nick's speaking to is there has to be this beautiful balance based off what we're doing in our lives to allow these things to be in harmony all the time.
Yeah.
And when we're not doing really what we're supposed to do, man, will your body let you know very quickly that things are going wrong, right? So, buddy, anxiety. How many people suffer with anxiety now and depression?
Yeah, which drives them towards addiction, right? Food and
oh yeah,
substance.
And it just cascades, right? I mean,
Yeah.
or just let's just talk about a physical injury where you're hurt, and let's say it affects your journey.
Yeah,
it can lead to depression, anxiety. Everything kind of funnels that way. Interestingly enough, when you have stress in the body, right?
Totally.
And these neurotransmitters, like a simple one that almost every day I have to talk about is this relationship of like glutamate and GABA and our vagus nerve and the gut-brain axis, and how just like central nervous system reactivity plays in your body's ability to keep some of these major ones in balance. So many people are just anxious because they've lost reactivity of their autonomic nervous system. They just kind of blew out. They're overstressed, right? So these are constantly in control, everybody, of literally how you're feeling on a daily basis. Do I feel great today? Do I feel up and happy and joyous? Or am I feeling down, depressed, and anxious? And am I easily stressed that day? I mean, all these things are kind of what we're speaking to right now. And your brain's kind of writing the show a little bit here. Things like Nick is saying, from the mindset, exercise to, toxicity affects our neurotransmitter health, our digestive health with our gut function. It goes on and on, but we are in control of most of these, is what I can honestly tell everybody listening right now. We are. And this is all fixable. There's not a pill that fixes this. How many people do you see, brother, that come in and they're been on meds for how long? But they haven't done anything to address their lifestyle, and they're still just as anxious and as depressed as they were when they got on that medication.
Yeah.
So there isn't a pill replacement for these things. You have these imbalances, everybody, because there's things going on the inside that need to change. And there's not an outside answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought it back to responsibility again, because that's just it. Same with the hormones. Your neurotransmitters are constantly just responding to the environment that you're incorporating. There's fascinating research even show the types of microbes that are in our gut as a result of our monotype diets that we eat, on a very regular basis. Without that diversification, we create microbes that support, problematic balances in our neurotransmitters. I mean, when we step back and look at this bigger picture, we're like, oh man, this all makes sense. It's just so obvious. You just have to find homeostasis and constantly challenge your body into adaptation to encourage the best possible outcomes, because diversity in microbes is going to make better diversification in hormones and neurotransmitters and enzymatic breakdown in your liver and everything else. Like, it's beautiful when we look at this philosophy that you and I are just so dialed into, and we can see all these things kind of coming together, and it gets us out of that tunnel vision for health. Like, I did a test, my neurotransmitters are low, I just got to focus on that, everything's gonna be better. Well, no, like, let's ask why. Let's just constantly, well, why is that there? We got to be like Diego and Soren and Kine and just go, well, why is that going on? Why is that happening? Why is that there? And we have to, and then we have to be willing to do something about it, because it's one thing to go, oh yeah, these are low, maybe I'll ask why, but then are you willing to make some changes? So when we talk about, just because we're getting close to the end, we hit some really important points, and the reason we want to talk about brain health is because over the next couple podcast episodes, we've got some really cool biohacking technologies, which is a whole another area of brain health that we're going to be interviewing some experts on, which we'll save for the details for those specific episodes. But what about maybe as like a sort of finishing point, just basic supplementation? What do we like to do to support brain health for people? Again, keeping in mind that we've taken some active steps towards the things that we first initially spoke to, but what are some good brain supportive tools?
Well, first thing, man, is omegas right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the top of the list. Outside of that, man, like when I like to support the brain, I really look a lot to boosting mitochondria. I mean, that's really kind of the two things I've really enjoyed, and almost every single person I need to support brain is omegas and something that upregulates mitochondrial function. We have the highest density of mitochondria in our brain, our heart, and our kidneys.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a woman, ovaries.
Yeah, and woman ovaries, right? So like, I mean, you really think about that, everybody. This is density. I mean, me and Nick have talked about these things over the past podcasts, and so your brain only has so much energy every day. And so if it's running out of gas, so are you, and so is everything else that has to do, right? And this is a lot of times where people are struggling. So yeah, a good mitochondrial supplement does wonders, man. I also like ASEA for the brain, the redox molecule supplement. It just helps the nervous system get more connected. So what I noticed with that, not only do I get an upregulated mitochondria, but the communication improves because of the redox. Because I mean, we're talking about communication, right, with the brain. So whatever it is going on with the brain, you just need to make sure that communication is clear.
Yeah. Can you break down redox for people? Because this might be the first time they've heard us talk about redox, but it's so important. Yeah.
So I'll just simplify it real quick. So just imagine a cell in your body that's inflamed, but every cell in your body is inflamed. So think of like a fire on the membrane of your cell. Okay. So I like to use the analogy of we have receptors on this membrane, and these receptors are like doors. They have to open and close all the time. But when we have cellular inflammation systemically and all of our cells are inflamed, these doors do not open and close very well. They slam shut. So then we can't hear our hormones. We can't hear our neurotransmitters at a cellular level. And like Nick's saying, there goes your ability to build all the building blocks you need in your body for your body to function. It's not getting the messages from the brain that it needs to do its job. Remember, everybody, your body is unconscious and the brain is conscious. So the brain's telling it what to do. So redox molecules are pretty amazing. So what this stuff does is the moment you give it to the system, it calms the fire down on your cell membranes. So then all of a sudden your antennas, your receptors on your cells actually start working and those doors start opening and closing better. So why is something as simple as that so important? Well, it's kind of just said it in how I described it. If those receptors aren't working and those doors aren't opening and closing, your body is not functioning at all. It's not really doing what it's supposed to. So redox molecules allow the system to stay in this clear functional space where at least we're getting reactivity at the cell to the brain and that messaging. It's funny, I do a test on people for this to show them what's going on. And for like ASEA, I'll have a muscle test. They have to do 15 repetitions of a contraction, like on a deltoid, for example. And if they can't do 15, I'll give them a little bit of the ASEA redox and I'll go back and they could do like 60 or 80 if they wanted to. And the patients will look at me like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. All I did was open the body's communication better. And it's actually talking to itself better. So we have another one called Ion. It used to be called Restore for the gut, another redox molecule enhancing communication in the microbiome. So it's doing this very same thing, but for the bacteria within our microbiome, allowing our bacteria to have clear, concise, precise communication, because all your bacteria have to know what jobs they have, what they're supposed to do, just like the cells got to be able to carry out instructions from the brain with hormones and neurotransmitters. So these things assist massively with communication in the body. They just open it up. Those are probably, I call those lifers in my clinic, because if I had to put anybody on two things, it would be ASEA and Ion. Because it does so many things for the basic function of communication in the body.
Yeah, I love that you started talking about redox molecules because it's such a poorly, like up until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't really pay much attention to what that even meant. But its role in mitochondrial health is, I mean, it's foundational. It's foundational.
You could throw molecular hydrogen into that.
Yeah. Fast tonic is the one that you could use.
Yeah, so there's another one, right? Yeah. So you have 3 heavy hitters right there, one for your gut, one for the whole, and then 2 for the whole system that you can either on and off throughout the year, which is kind of what I do. I always take ion. I'll cycle ASEA and the hydrogen on and off throughout the whole year because it's just keeping me more connected all the time. Because remember, everybody, you have vital function demands. And number 1 is communication, 2 is resources, 3 is response, 4 is reactivity. But if that communication is not always good, none of the other ones are going to be doing their job. So again, how do you support that communication? Redox.
So good. So let's summarize some of those nutrients. You see omegas, like a proper ratio of omega-6 to 3. Yep. We'll break down on a future podcast a little bit more about cell membrane health in relation to omega-6s and that ratio. But those are super important. We said the redox molecules and mitochondrial health or mitochondrial-based supplements, and which could include fast tonic, ASEA, ion. Was there another one that you said?
Just those 2 so far. What do you got, man?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that list just a full spectrum amino acids. You know, building everything foundational from enzymes to neurotransmitters to the repair aspects of those receptor sites at the cellular level, at the neurological level. I love amino acids for brain health.
Well, and anybody over 40, that should be a daily.
Yeah.
It's for muscles too, right?
Yep.
Everyone,
I literally have those things sitting on my back counter. You can see the ASEA bottle. Yeah. There's a perfect amino. Those are just standard things. You know, it's funny, like, and this is a little sidetrack, but when our kids get sick, I'm sure you're the same way, David, like, first thing we do, we give them Restore, we give them the ASEA, like plugging this stuff in regularly because, you know, I don't even think, and vitamin C, I mean, of course, that's sort of a no-brainer, but I think more about how do we get the communication system working more effectively first, and then we can start throwing in some of the herbs or whatever else, but yeah.
I check Diego immediately. I check his Vegas for NIS if he's starting to get sick, because I know that if that thing's not functioning, that his immune system's not doing its job. I mean, we start with communication. I mean,
that's it. Yeah, and then what else I got? I mean, there are some other products that have some like brain-specific physiological support, like Neurosin from Systemic Formulas is a great one. It has a lot of it has a good amount of alpha GPC, which is alpha glycerylphosphatidylcholine, which is basically the building block for acetylcholine, all like the ground neurotransmitter, but it's also supporting myelin sheath and anything that supports neurological function like B12 and some of those other things are great too. And carnitine, again, a lot of this stuff goes back to mitochondrial health to be honest, but alpha GPC and that Neurosin are great tools. And then those also target a little bit more into the pituitary gland too, which again, that's communication and regulation. So there's lots more supplements, but those are some of our favorite, unless you've got any to add to that list.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking we probably need to have like a brain biohack episode where we talk about some of the things we'd like to get better performance out of our brain, how we can target those things. But the reason we're not, everyone, is because those all come after you do all the basic things right. And then those hacks actually do amazing things once you got your foundation.
So true.
I had a buddy call me or text me the other day, ask me about nootropics, and he wanted another nootropic recommendation. But then, of course, my first question is, well, are you doing all these other things right first? And of course, he wasn't. But yeah, man, I mean, those things have a place. But like I'm saying with Nick, is you got to be doing all the other stuff we're talking about first, and then they do amazing things. It's a supplement. It just kind of makes things better.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I think it's a good place to finish because that is so common. I mean, we get, as you can imagine, I mean, those of you listening, or maybe you've seen us, but people come in all the time asking for the treatment, right? Because we just have this view of health that I just need that thing from outside, as David was speaking to, in order to fix the situation. And they're looking for the nootropics or the microdosing or all these things, but they haven't set up the proper garden inside the body to receive and help that thing grow and to create, massive action in the body. And so we can't recommend enough that you gotta start from the ground up, and then these treatments become so effective, and then they become that extra 2 to 10% improvement. And but without that foundation, maybe you're having an experience, maybe you're not, and then you just sort of throw it off like, well, I tried that, I spent $50, $60, $70, $100 on that supplement didn't work for me, so I'm going to move on to something else now. So you really do need to build that foundation to receive that proper treatment. And what is that? That's the whisper, right?
Yes, absolutely, man. No shortcuts.
Nope.
No, especially
We've tried, right?
Yeah, I have tried. It doesn't work. I've tried by helping my wife overcome an autoimmune disease for 10 years. So yeah. I know I know what the reality of that is. But.
Oh man. And you know, like as a doctor sitting there and seeing the discomfort in the patient's eyes, and I'm thinking of, I'm not saying I can say any names, but I'm thinking of someone that been helping out recently, and I can see them constantly search, but there must be that thing. There must be that thing that's going to make me feel like how I used to feel. Mm-hmm. And I so deeply want to say, like, well, there just isn't that thing. Well, and I do say that, but I try to say it as gentle as way possible, that there is not that thing. You have to prepare the garden. Like, it's like the field of dreams, build it and they will come. Right. Yep. You got to do that work. And there's like really no other way around it. And people get so stuck on, I used to be this way. I used to be a high functioning individual. I used to be able to perform, such and such and such. And now, like, after these sequence of events, now like everything's kind of shut down. I've been this way for months and I got to get back to where I was. And I always say, like, listen, what if we could create a new version of you that you don't yet know yet? What if we could introduce you to that version of yourself through getting back to the basics, creating homeostasis, and see what grows from there? You may just surprise yourself, because it's so common that people will want to get back to how things used to be. And that's not the direction. We can't go backward. We got to go forward.
Well, and to second to what you're saying, man, I would tell people how you heal, what that's going to look like, is probably nothing the way you were thinking it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And like Nick's saying, it's more of a mode of creation than looking for the shortcut or the magic therapy or fix. It's like, what can I create moving forward to remedy all this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting as you're talking, because like we see people every day and we work on them, and that journey for everybody is so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so different.
There's no cookie cutter recipe.
No, it's so different for every individual.
Yeah.
And I would probably be safe to say that most people that we help, they're like, wow, I didn't think it would be this way that I got better.
Mm-hmm.
But, it does. So
it is. We're all unique. We're all
very unique, man.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's just to maybe finish this line off, is that on this idea of individualistic healthcare, is that we're about 99% the same genetically, but we're like 2% the same, or maybe, I'm not sure if I got that exact number right, but microbiologically speaking, we're so unique in our unique makeup of our microbiome diversity. Yes. And so that's the epigenetic switch. That's the thing that's communicating to those cells to say what kind of environment our bodies are in. And that, like, you're different, even from twins, like you're so different in that microbiome. And so that how you do with that supplement or that nutrition plan or whatever, there's no one size fits all for any therapeutic, whether it be conventional, pharmaceutical, to all the way down to alternative and woo-woo medicine.
Very true, man. Very true.
Yeah. Cool. All right, people. Well, I think that's a good wrap on some of these core foundational supportive systems that we need to do in order to optimize brain function, brain health, brain repair. And speaking of brain repair and neurointegration, and we mentioned previously that we're going to have a couple amazing guests on that are sharing how they utilize these biohacking tools, the TCD Clear, which is a neurofeedback or brainwave entrainment tool, and then something called BrainTap, which both David and I recently added into our clinics. So we're excited to have those conversations.
Pumped. And here's our home play for today. So the first three things that me and Nick focused on were mindset, movement, and toxicity. So these are three really easy places to start. Once you start thinking about your paradigm, mindset about all these things, what's it looking like for that journey? Number two, are you moving enough? start doing some cardio 3 times a week, 30 minutes, maybe some primal movement stuff for 15 to 30 minutes, 3 times a week. Start seeing how you feel. And then toxicity. Why don't you start assessing what your toxic load is? I want you to look on the inside of your house and your office and your car, the soaps, the lotions, the shampoos, the food you eat. Just start digging into everything and look to see how much more you can clean that up.
Yeah. Awesome.
And that's just a great place to start.
Such good home play.
Buddy, this was a blast.
It was. Yeah, these sort of off the cuff, we like David and I come up with a basic plan for when him and I are coming together. Often we have got some ideas beforehand, but today was kind of like, we need to set the stage for brain health. And again, this is why we love doing these podcasts, because we learn so much, and it's great to get these ideas out and share with all of you that are tuning in. So we love the support and sharing, and we're going to keep on bringing it because we love hanging out with each other. So
yes, and thanks for listening, everybody. It's been a blast.
Yeah, totally. Okay, all the best to you, brother. We'll see you next week.
Love you, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.